The transformation of pain into power. There's a letter written on December 10th, 1513, by a man whose shoulders had been dislocated 3 weeks earlier. A man who had lost everything: his career, his city, his identity. A man who should have been broken. Instead, he wrote the most dangerous book in Western civilization. But here's what nobody tells you about that letter, about that moment, about the book that would make his name synonymous with evil for 5 centuries. He wasn't writing about how to be cruel. He was writing about what happens when the universe stops pretending to be fair, when the rules you believed in reveal themselves as fiction, when every assumption you built your life on collapses in a single afternoon. You know this moment. Maybe you haven't been tortured in a Renaissance prison. Maybe you haven't been exiled from the only city you've ever loved. But you felt it. That sickening vertigo when you realize the world doesn't work the way they told you it works. When you watch someone less qualified get the position you earned. When you see cruelty rewarded and kindness punished. When you understand, finally, that your goodness has been making you prey. Niccolò Machiavelli was 43 years old when they came for him. He'd spent 14 years serving Florence, diplomatic missions to kings and popes, strategic planning, crisis management. He loved his city more than his soul. Those are his words, not mine. And in February 1513, they arrested him anyway, hung him by his wrists with his arms tied behind his back. 6 drops of the strappado, each drop dislocating your shoulders, tearing ligaments, turning your body into an instrument of confession. He didn't confess, because there was nothing to confess. His name appeared on a list of people who might be sympathetic to a plot against the Medici family. That was enough. In the machinery of power, suspicion and guilt are the same thing. They released him after 22 days, not because they believed him innocent, but because a new pope needed celebrating, and they declared an amnesty. He walked out of the Bargello prison with ruined shoulders, no job, no prospects, and a clarity about human nature that would echo through history. This video isn't about political philosophy. It's about what happens when your pain becomes your teacher, when your trauma strips away every comfortable illusion, when you're forced to see reality as it actually operates instead of how you wish it would operate, and what you do with that vision, whether you use it to destroy yourself or whether you transform it into something that changes how humans understand power forever. For the next 45 minutes, we're going into the wound, into the moment when Machiavelli stopped being a servant of Florence and became something else entirely. A mirror, a warning. A philosopher who understood that the greatest act of love for your civilization might be telling it truths it doesn't want to hear. Because here's what you need to understand before we go any further. Machiavelli didn't write The Prince to teach people how to be tyrants. He wrote it because he'd watched his republic die. Because he'd seen what happens when good people refuse to understand the mechanics of power, while bad people master them completely. Because he loved Florence enough to say the things that would make people hate him for 500 years. And somewhere in your life, right now, you're facing the same choice he faced. You can keep pretending the world is fair, or you can look directly at how it actually works. One of these paths keeps you comfortable and powerless. The other path might save you, but it requires you to stop lying to yourself about what you already know is true. The fortune that destroyed Machiavelli is the same fortune that's been destroying you. The only question is, are you ready to learn what he learned? Or are you going to keep believing in rules that no one else is following? Section 1. The river that swept everything away. Let me read you something. It's from that letter. The one Machiavelli wrote from his farm after the torture, after the exile, after everything ended. He's describing his daily routine to Francesco Vittori, his friend who's now living in Rome, still employed, still relevant, still part of the world Machiavelli can no longer access. I get up in the morning with the sun and go into a grove I am having cut down, where I remain 2 hours to look over the work of the past day and kill some time with the cutters, who have always some bad luck story ready about either themselves or their neighbors. He's selling firewood. The former second chancellor of Florence, the man who negotiated with kings, who understood the intricacies of European power politics better than almost anyone alive. He's arguing with peasants about the price of timber. And then, in the evening, something else happens. Something that will matter more than everything that came before. When evening comes, I return home and go into my study. At the door, I take off my clothes of the day, covered with mud and mire, and I put on my regal and courtly garments, and decently reclothed, I enter the ancient courts of ancient men, where, received by them lovingly, I feed on the food that alone is mine, and that I was born for. Do you understand what's happening here? He's describing a ritual, a transformation. He's taking off the costume of his humiliation and putting on the identity of who he actually is. And then he's talking to the dead, reading ancient history, philosophy, politics. And in those conversations with writers dead for 1,500 years, he finds more genuine understanding than he ever found in the living courts of power. This is what catastrophe does. It shows you what's permanent and what's performance, what can be taken and what cannot. But here's the part that will wreck you if you let it. Machiavelli knew this was coming. Not the specific betrayal, not the torture, but he knew that fortune, and fortune is the key to everything we're going to talk about. He knew that fortune was not his friend, that fortune is not anyone's friend. In The Prince, he describes fortune as a raging river. When it floods, it destroys everything in its path. Trees, buildings, lives, civilizations. And everyone runs from it. Everyone yields to its fury. There's no standing against it in the moment of its rage. But, and this is Machiavelli's insight, this is what makes him more than just a bitter exile. Before the rains come, you can build dikes. You can create embankments. You can prepare. Not to stop fortune entirely, because that's impossible, but to channel her rage, to survive her violence, to limit the devastation. The Italian princes didn't build dikes. They assumed the weather would always be fair. They assumed their positions were secure. They assumed virtue would protect them. And when fortune turned, when the French invaded, when the Spanish conquered, when everything collapsed, they were swept away. Machiavelli built dikes, not physical ones, intellectual ones. He studied, he learned, he analyzed. He became the most competent, most knowledgeable, most strategically brilliant administrator in Florence. And fortune swept him away anyway. So what did he learn? What was the lesson of the flood? He learned that fortune respects only one thing: virtù. And virtù isn't virtue. It's not moral goodness. It's not playing by the rules. Virtù is capacity. It's competence weaponized. It's the flexibility to do whatever circumstances require, without being paralyzed by what you wish circumstances required instead. Listen to what he says about fortune. She shows her power where virtù and wisdom do not prepare to resist her, and directs her fury where she knows that no dikes or embankments are ready to hold her. Fortune seeks weakness. Fortune finds the gap in your preparation. Fortune identifies where you've relied on hope instead of strategy, and that's where she strikes. You've experienced this. The career you thought was secure until restructuring eliminated your position. The relationship you thought was solid until it wasn't. The identity you built that evaporated when circumstances changed. You thought you were prepared. You thought you were safe. Fortune found the place where you weren't. And here's the psychological brutality that Machiavelli forces you to confront. Fortune didn't attack you because you deserved it. Fortune didn't spare others because they were better. Fortune is amoral. Fortune is a force of nature. Fortune doesn't care about your intentions, your efforts, your goodness. Fortune only cares whether you're prepared for fortune. This is what breaks people about Machiavelli's philosophy. It removes justice from the equation. It says that the universe doesn't care about fairness, that bad things happen to good people not because of some cosmic test or karmic debt, but because fortune is a raging river and they didn't build the fucking dike. Machiavelli watched Florence prepare inadequately. He warned them. He recommended reforms, military changes, strategic repositioning. They ignored him because the weather was nice. Because building dikes is expensive and unglamorous and requires acknowledging that catastrophe is always possible. So they gambled on perpetual sunshine. And when the storm came, they blamed him, the person who tried to prepare them. They tortured him. They exiled him. They destroyed his life for trying to save theirs. This is what happens to prophets. Not the religious kind, the pragmatic kind. The ones who see disaster approaching and have the audacity to say it out loud. They're punished twice. Once when they're ignored before the disaster. Again when they're scapegoated after it. Machiavelli could have become bitter, could have descended into pure misanthropy, could have spent his exile writing screeds about how stupid everyone was. Instead, he did something more dangerous. He wrote a manual, a guide for anyone who might listen, a way to understand fortune so you're not destroyed by her. But fortune isn't just floods and wars and political collapse. Fortune is every time someone less qualified succeeds because they understood dynamics you didn't. Fortune is every relationship that failed because you played fair while they played strategically. Fortune is every moment when your goodness became your weakness. Machiavelli says fortune controls half of our actions. Only half. The other half is yours. Is your preparation, your adaptability, your willingness to see clearly and act accordingly. The tragedy isn't that fortune exists. The tragedy is that people surrender the half they control by refusing to acknowledge that fortune exists at all. And then he says something that makes people furious, something that sounds deeply misogynist to modern ears, but reveals something about how fortune operates. Fortune is a woman, and it is necessary, if you wish to keep her down, to beat and maul her. Everyone stops there. Everyone condemns the metaphor, and they should. It's a violent image that reflects the deep sexism of his era. But look past the metaphor to the mechanism he's describing. Fortune responds to boldness, not caution. Fortune respects force, not pleading. Fortune yields to those who act decisively, not those who wait for permission. He's not actually talking about women. He's talking about chaos, about the universe's indifference, about the fact that timidity in the face of fortune ensures destruction, while audacity at least gives you a chance. You've been timid, not because you're weak, but because you believed that good behavior would be enough, that playing by rules you never agreed to would somehow protect you, that fortune would spare you because you meant well. Machiavelli is telling you, build the dike, not someday. Now. Learn the actual mechanics of power in your domain. Understand how decisions really get made. Recognize who has influence and why. Stop believing that merit alone will save you and start building structural resilience. Because the storm is coming. It's always coming. Fortune is patient, but she's certain. And when she arrives, she won't care about your intentions. She'll only care whether you're prepared. The river swept everything away from Machiavelli. Career, status, identity, city, everything except his mind. And in that mind, in those conversations with ancient thinkers, in that ritual transformation from peasant back to philosopher every evening, he built something fortune couldn't touch. He built understanding. And understanding, once gained, is the only thing fortune cannot take from you. Section 2. The Double Life of Truth. Here's the secret that makes Machiavelli actually dangerous. He was a Republican writing for a prince. Most people don't know this. They read The Prince and assume he's advocating for tyranny, for autocracy, or one-man rule by any means necessary. But if you read his other major work, the Discourses on Livy, you find something completely different. You find a philosopher in love with the Roman Republic, arguing that republics are superior to principalities, that collective governance, when done right, creates more stability and more virtue than any individual ruler ever could. So which is the real Machiavelli? The Republican or the princely advisor? The man who loves liberty or the man who tells tyrants how to rule? Both. And that's the point. That's the sophistication everyone misses when they reduce him to the ends justify the means. Machiavelli understood that truth has contexts, that what works in one circumstance fails in another, that Florence under the Republic required different strategies than Florence under the Medici, that telling a prince how to rule effectively isn't the same as believing princely rule is ideal. He's writing from exile. His republic is dead. The Medici are back in power, and he desperately wants back in, wants relevance again, wants to serve Florence in whatever form Florence now takes. So he writes The Prince and dedicates it to Lorenzo de' Medici. But here's what cuts deeper. He's also teaching the Medici how to do what they're going to do anyway, but do it competently enough that Florence might survive. If there must be a prince, let it be a prince who understands power well enough not to destroy the city through incompetence. This is the wound at the center of Machiavelli's work. The compromise between idealism and realism, between what should be and what is, between the republic he loved and the principality he had to navigate. You live in this wound too. The job you have isn't the job you want, but you do it anyway because survival requires it. The relationship that doesn't match your ideal, but contains enough good to continue. The compromises you make between the life you imagined and the life that's actually available. Machiavelli's genius is that he doesn't pretend these compromises don't exist. He doesn't write a philosophy for an ideal world populated by ideal people. He writes for the world as it is, populated by humans as they actually behave, in conditions as they actually present themselves. In the discourses, writing for people who might build or rebuild a republic, he's expansive about virtue, about civic participation, about how collective wisdom can balance individual ambition. In The Prince, writing for someone who already has power in an unstable situation, he's surgical about cruelty, about fear, about how to maintain authority when everyone around you is trying to undermine it. Two different books, two different truths, both valid in their contexts. This is what sophisticated thought looks like. Not this is right and this is wrong, but this works here and this works there. Situational intelligence, contextual adaptation, the recognition that principles become rigid prisons when applied without regard to circumstance. Your moral education was probably the opposite. You were taught universal rules. Always be honest, always be kind, always trust, always forgive. As if every situation can be addressed with the same response. As if wisdom is about finding the one true way and adhering to it regardless of context. Machiavelli is telling you, that's how children think. Adults understand that honesty in one situation is suicide in another. That kindness without boundaries enables abuse. That trust without verification is foolishness. That forgiveness without accountability perpetuates harm. He says something in The Prince that everyone quotes, but nobody actually applies. A man who wishes to act entirely up to his professions of virtue soon meets with what destroys him among so much that is evil. Read it again. He's not saying virtue is worthless. He's saying unilateral virtue in a world where others don't share your constraints is suicide. If you're the only one playing by rules everyone else ignores, you're not virtuous, you're prey. This hits at something you've been avoiding. The relationships where you kept being the bigger person while they kept taking advantage. The workplaces where you stayed ethical while others advanced through manipulation. The situations where your principles became the weapon used against you. Machiavelli is asking, at what point does your virtue become complicity in your own destruction? At what point does refusing to adapt become a form of moral vanity? At what point are you more concerned with feeling good about yourself than actually protecting what matters? The republicanism in his discourses shows you what he actually values. Liberty, civic virtue, collective flourishing, laws that constrain power instead of serving it. These are his ideals. These are what he fought for his entire career. But The Prince shows you what he learned. That ideals die when people who hold them don't understand how to defend them. that virtue without power is performance, that if good people refuse to master the tools of power, bad people will master them instead and use them against everything good people claim to value. The double life of truth is this: you can love peace and learn war. You can prefer honesty and practice discretion. You can value collaboration and maintain competitive edges. Not because you're two-faced, because reality requires multiple faces, because different situations demand different aspects of who you are. In his evening ritual, Machiavelli puts on his courtly robes and enters the world of ancient thinkers. He's not pretending to be someone he's not. He's accessing the part of himself that his daytime humiliation can't touch. The intellectual, the philosopher, the strategist. These are all real parts of him. Context determines which part leads. You do this too, but unconsciously. You're different at work than at home, different with friends than with strangers, different in crisis than in calm. The question isn't whether you have multiple selves. The question is whether you're conscious about when and why you deploy them. Machiavelli makes it conscious. He tells princes, appear merciful, but be prepared to be cruel. Appear honest, but be prepared to deceive. Not because you should want to be cruel or deceitful, but because if you're not prepared to deploy these tools when necessary, someone who has no qualms about using them will destroy you. And here's the part that makes this genuinely uncomfortable. He's right. You know he's right. You've watched it happen. The person who appeared kind while being strategically ruthless succeeded. The person who was genuinely kind without strategy failed. This observation doesn't make ruthlessness good. It makes strategic awareness necessary. The wound remains. Machiavelli wanted his republic, wanted collective governance by informed citizens who cared about the common good, wanted laws that protected liberty and constrained tyranny. He spent 14 years trying to build and protect that system. It failed. Not because the ideals were wrong, because the defenders of those ideals didn't understand power as well as the people who wanted to destroy them. Because they thought virtue alone would save them. Because they built beautiful principles on foundations of sand. So Machiavelli wrote 2 books. One for people trying to build republics, explaining how civic virtue and institutional design can create stable liberty. One for people operating in principalities, explaining how power actually works when concentrated in individual hands. Both books are true. Both books are necessary. And the fact that they seem contradictory is only a problem if you think truth should be simple, if you think one set of rules should govern all situations. If you're still thinking like a child who needs the world to be consistent so you feel safe. Machiavelli is telling you, grow up. The world isn't consistent. Power operates differently in different structures. What succeeds in a democracy fails in an autocracy. What works in peacetime creates disaster in war. Wisdom isn't finding the one true answer. Wisdom is knowing which answer fits which question. The double life isn't hypocrisy. It's sophistication. It's the ability to hold complexity, to see that you can love ideals and understand realities. To recognize that betraying your principles in every situation is corruption, but applying your principles identically in every situation is stupidity. You're living this double life, whether you admit it or not. The question is whether you're doing it consciously, strategically, with clear understanding of why you're deploying which version of yourself, or whether you're doing it reactively, guiltily, while telling yourself stories about authenticity that prevent you from actually being effective. Machiavelli chose consciousness, chose to see clearly even when clarity was painful, chose to write both books because both truths needed telling. And that choice, the choice to refuse simple answers when complex ones are correct, that's what makes him dangerous 500 years later. Because he's not offering you comfort, he's offering you sight. And once you see what he saw, you can't go back to the simplicity that's been keeping you powerless. Like, comment, and subscribe. Then go watch part 2. That's where everything deepens. Thanks for watching. This is MindX.